Okay, everyone. So let's carry on with these committees. So we looked at scrutinising the legislation. We're now going to look at committees in terms of scrutinising the executive. Okay. And this is mainly done through something called departmental select committees. So they've got nothing to do with the legislative process. These are kind of separate. And unlike legislative committees, there's fewer of them in terms of number of MPs on them. There's roughly between 11 and 13 backbench MPs on these committees. Unlike legislative committees, which are ad hoc, so they only form for a particular bill and then they disband, these committees are more permanent. So they last, if you like, the entire time of a parliament. So, for example, if you've just been elected in December this year, you could probably, and you're on some kind of select committee, you'll probably think you've been on there for 4 or 5 years because with such a big majority, I suspect the next parliament will be that length of time. And of course, that has big implications because if you're on a committee, say the Education Select Committee, for like 4 or 5 years, it means as those years go by, you build up more expertise. So MPs on these committees do build up expertise, and then a number of them, if they get re-elected, will be on the same committee again if they want to be for the next 4 or 5 years. So they can see how you can get people on these committees who have real expertise. There's 19 of these departmental select committees, and their main job is to oversee the work of government departments. So basically, they need to check like value for money, the policies which the department is making. They might question, well, last year this education bill went through with the aim of doing this. What evidence have you got that it's been successful? We've heard in your department that there's some problems regarding this. What are you doing about it? So they can ask these sorts of awkward questions. They've got the power to question ministers, so they can ask the Secretary of State to come to a future committee meeting and grill them, basically. They can question civil servants. There's that famous one, isn't there, back in the Blair days, to do with weapons of mass destruction, and they asked that civil servant who was the weapons inspector, who spoke very softly, I can't remember his name, was it David Kelly, to come in, and then he killed himself, didn't he, not long afterwards. But they can ask for civil servants to come in. They can call any type of witness they want and any official papers which they want as well. So, for example, when the Home Secretary Amber Rudd in the May government, there was that scandal arose, wasn't there, about the Windrush, if you might recall. They asked Amber Rudd, I can't say her name, Amber Rudd, to come to the committee, the Home Affairs Select Committee. They quizzed her, and then she actually got herself into bigger trouble as a consequence because she said, I can't remember what she said now, but she said something wrong, or she didn't disclose something. It kind of suggested that she didn't know what was happening, basically, and so they went for her about that. They often, well, they give reports on their findings, okay, which are then revealed to Parliament. So they kind of announce them to the House of Commons that we've been looking at this issue and this is what we've found. And it's often cross-party lines as well. So the MPs on these committees, there's less whip influence on them. The chairs of these committees are actually elected by backbench MPs, so, and front bench, well, the House of Commons. So previously, in the old days, the government whips would choose the committee chairman or chairwomen to choose nice people from their point of view. However, since around, I think it was 2010, this changed, or something around that time anyway, they decided that actually there should be a vote from all MPs as to who they want to be as the chairman. So, you put your name forward, say, I'd like to be chair of the Health Select Committee, please. There might be two other rivals. There's then a vote, a secret vote of all MPs, and that's how they choose the person. Okay, and these committees are often quite critical of the government as well, which is probably what you want if you're scrutinising the executive. The next slide has a few examples. It's got the Home Affairs Select Committee in 2013. They expressed concern that the government wasn't doing enough to combat cybercrime and fraud, and as a consequence of that, in October, the government set up the National Crime Agency with the aim of dealing with cybercrime. So it does show that they can have quite a big influence, these committees. And as I said before, this Home Affairs Select Committee also, partly anyway, undermined or kind kind of destroy the career of the Home Secretary Amber Rudd, because they reveal that she didn't know stuff about the Windrush. So they can be quite significant. Okay, on the next slide, you've then got a table with some of the pros and cons of these committees. I'm just trying to get it on my screen. Okay, there are certain strengths of them, so they do act more independently. There's less kind of partisanship on these committees. The chairman, because they've been elected secretly by backbench MPs and frontbench MPs in fact, they're often more independent-minded. At the moment, the chair, the certain ones which are reserved for the government's party to chair. At the moment, the Health Select Committee, the chairman of that is Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt used to be, under Theresa May and David Cameron, the Health Secretary. So he's got lots of expertise in healthcare and policy to do with the NHS and health and stuff like that. He's now a backbench MP and he chairs the Health Select Committee. During this COVID-19 virus thing, you may have seen him. He's popped up once or twice, raising on the media some awkward questions about the government strategy. So perhaps, just keep an eye out over this week and next to see whether if he pops up, you can say to your mum or whoever, oh, he chairs the Select Committee, and the Select Committee do these things. Okay, and because your mum stroke dad can't escape the house, they're going to have to listen to you, aren't they? Anyhow, they do have the power to call in ministers, and the government accepts, again, there's been some studies done of this, the government accepts around about 40% of their recommendations. Now, you might say that doesn't sound very much. Well, it's better than 0%. And 40%, so it's just under half the recommendations made by these committees are accepted by the government. So I suppose in that way, it does kind of show the government do keep an eye on these committees. However, you could also put that statistic in the counter argument, couldn't you, and say, yeah, but they ignore more than half the stuff. In terms of weaknesses, they're not always independent. They're not kind of like Snow White and, purer than pure, okay? There is party politics does take place. And they've got no ability to actually enforce their recommendations. So, like we just said, 40% of their recommendations get taken up by the government, but 60% don't. And they can't force the government to take up some of their recommendations. Although what you'll often find is that, like Jeremy Hunt recently, they often go in the media, okay, and they can get a bit of a media storm sometimes if it's something controversial and say, well, we recommended this and the government haven't done it yet, and we think they ought to do it because of this, this and this. And again, the pressure can be put on informally on the government in that respect. Okay, one of these committees, there's a few special committees, if that's the right word. One of them is the Public Accounts Committee. Now, when I did this PowerPoint, it was chaired by someone called Meg Hillier. I need to double check whether, in fact, you can find out actually, whether she still is the chair of this committee. Because since the general election, they sometimes change the chairs. So just double check whether she is. But this committee is always chaired by a senior opposition backbencher. So the government never, so a member of the government, so like, the current Conservative, for example, would never chair this committee. So when Labour's in power, Conservatives chair this committee. When the Conservative are in power, then Labour chairs this committee. And the reason for that is it investigates finances. And it's making sure that money is being spent properly. And unlike the departmental select committees, which just focus on one department, so the Health Departmental Select Committee just focuses on the Department for Health. The Home Affairs Departmental Select Committee just focuses on the Home Office. The Education Departmental Select Committee, the Education Department, you get the general gist. Well, this committee looks at all of them. It has like an overview of all government spending. And obviously, if they hear or they find out there's an issue in a certain department, then they'll hone in on that department. But they kind of have a general investigation of government finances and government spending. I suppose their main job is to make sure taxpayers' money is being well spent. Okay, so they'll look at things like, why is Crossrail costing a lot more money than originally stated? Why is HS2 looking like it's going to cost a lot more money? Is that value for money? And again, it's often quite influential. It's often quite critical of the government as well. On the PowerPoint, there is a link to Democracy Live to see some of this committee taking place. Again, there are certain strengths and weaknesses of this committee. So again, it's fairly independent minded. They do have full access to government financial details, and it is quite well respected. But just like the departmental select committees, it can't enforce its decisions, and it's not made up of financial experts either. And so it's a bit like the departmental select committees. It's kind of, you've got like 12, 13 MPs versus the tens of thousands of civil servants in that department. They can make life a bit tricky to find information, and these are not experts in finance. Although, again, over 4 or 5 years, they do build up that expertise, and again, you do see people on these committees for quite a while. Okay, I've then got some examples on the next slide. So in 2013, the PAC committee criticised Revenue and Customs for failing to collect enough tax from Google UK, and then as a consequence of that, Revenue and Customs said it would re-examine the tax affairs of Google. If you went on the Parliament website and looked at this committee, it would tell you the types of things which they're currently looking at. Okay, I've not had a chance to look, but I'm interested to see whether they've looked at things like HS2, for example, and why that's costing more, or Crossrail perhaps. So you can find yourself a nice recent example from there to use. Okay. The next committee, again, this is a special committee. It was formed by the Blair government. It's something called the Liaison Committee. Now, this committee is made up of the chairs of the departmental select committees. So like we said before, there's 19 departmental select committees. Each one oversees a single government department, and each one's got a chairman or a chairwoman who kind of, focuses that committee. Well, this committee is made up of the chairman or chairwomen of each of those departmental select committees. So there's 19 of them on it. Okay, between them, and they have a chairman of this liaison committee as well, and between them they basically they choose which committee reports should be debated in the House of Commons. So this committee is quite important because they can say, well, actually our committee looked at this, which was really important, and then the other 19 might say, yeah, actually we think that's really important as well. That does merit a full debate in the House of Commons. Now, since 2002, it's been particularly important because twice a year, these 19 departmental select committee chairmen can quiz the Prime Minister directly for a couple of hours. So, again, it was Blair who first did this. He thought that because he had such a big majority, he required a bit more scrutiny, he felt. And so, ever since 2002, twice a year, the Prime Minister goes to this committee and for several hours answers questions on, could be on anything to do with government policy. And so these are filmed, so you've got a picture on the screen here of David Cameron doing it. So it means the Prime Minister, if you think about it, is quite isolated. He's got his officials behind him, but he needs to be well prepared for these committees because he can probably guess some of the issues that will pop up because he knows what kind of problems there's been in government and stuff over the last few months, and he probably knows, well, he will know kind of what these committee chairmen and these committees have been discussing and finding out about. But he's got to be careful because he can always be asked questions which he's not expecting and stuff like that. So Prime Minister got to be really well prepared for these because they don't want to kind of trip up. So again, and then some Prime Ministers have done better at these than others. So Blair was quite good at them. Gordon Brown less so, but he was very much into the details. I don't think Theresa May particularly enjoyed these sorts of committees. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think Boris Johnson had one. Or did he have one? Did he cancel it? I can't remember now. But there's something about Boris Johnson and his one. I think it was cancelled because of the general election, and of course we've had the COVID-19 since then. So he should be due one relatively soon. Okay, so they're the most important committees, and they do lots of scrutiny. There are some other committees as well, which are quite important for different things. One is called the Standards and Privileges Committee. This deals with discipline matters against an MP. So if an MP has been seen or been accused of fiddling their expenses, for example, they would go before this committee to be told off, basically. There's the European Scrutiny Committees. Again, these won't be around for very much longer. There's one in the Commons and one in the Lords, and they basically they examine legislation from the EU and then see how it's going to affect UK law, essentially, and what UK laws, which are currently being proposed, need to be amended to fit in with the EU. So if the UK government want to introduce a new law, it'll go to this committee as well to check that, yes, that will pass the EU kind of regulations. I'm not sure whether these committees are currently been disbanded, or there certainly will be by the time we officially leave. So at the moment, I'm not quite sure they're still in place or not, but they won't be for very much longer. And then in 2005, there's also a modernisation committee formed to look at how Parliament itself can be improved, how they can improve the workings. Okay, so that does you on committees. It's a quite a big topic area. The basics to get out of it is they've got two functions. You've got the legislative committees, which I think are quite weak. You've got the departmental select committees, which are becoming increasingly important and increasingly significant. And again, both of them should appear in essays. It was a general one regarding scrutiny of legislation and or scrutiny of the executive. So you need to fill out the thing on this. There is some actually reading on these committees as well on the team's website. So I suggest you have a look at some of that reading as well. And have a look on the Parliament website, find out who some of these committee chairmen are, etc., etc. Okay, so that will do for now. On Thursday, it'll probably be, I'll do my next set of videos, probably on backbench MPs. I'm also going to set you a nice Easter essay to write as well, because I hate for you to get bored or too bored under the current lockdown situation. Okay, so I'll speak to you later in the week.